Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're going to start things off with a bit of a ghost story, but it's not set in a haunted house. It's actually set in your calendar, specifically right now.
Yeah, it is a pretty spooky time of year, statistically speaking.
Right. So I want you to picture the floor of a commercial gym. If you just go back in your mind to January 2nd, the place is physically vibrating with energy. You can smell the fresh rubber on the sneakers. Everyone is wearing that New Year, New Me t-shirt.
Oh, absolutely.
The elliptical machines are taken. The squat racks are just completely full. It is electric with hope.
It is the absolute peak of human optimism. I mean, you can practically feel it in the air.
Exactly. But we were recording this in late February. And if you walk into that exact same gym today,
Like a ghost town.
silence, tumbleweeds rolling past the dumbbells. I mean, the regulars are there, sure, but that massive wave of new people, gone. We are currently standing in what we could call the February graveyard.
That is a very vivid image, but unfortunately, it's completely accurate. And, it's not just gyms. If you look at the user data for language learning apps or budgeting software or meditation apps, the usage graphs all look completely identical. They spike almost vertically on January 1st, and then they flatline by mid-February.
And this is the exact phenomenon we are unpacking today. We're calling it the week 2 paradox. Because I was looking at the retention curves you sent over in the research packet before we started, and honestly, the drop-off, it doesn't even look like a curve. It looks like a cliff.
It is a cliff. It really is. And to understand the stakes here, we have to look at the massive disparity. In week 1 of a new goal, whether it's fitness, finance, learning Mandarin, whatever, retention is sky high. Something like 75% of people stick to the plan for those first 7 days. They are meal prepping. They are waking up at 5 a.m. They are just crushing it.
So week 1 is a total success story.
Usually, yeah. But then you cross the threshold into week 2, specifically right around day 10 to day 14, and the floor drops out. Retention collapses to 40%.
That is just a staggering number. We lose nearly half the population in a span of about 4 days.
Roughly, yes. And the paradox part of this is why. I mean, think about it. Nothing physically changed. The weights didn't get heavier. The Mandarin vocabulary didn't suddenly get impossible. The external environment is largely the same, but the internal drive just completely vanishes.
See, and that's where I get stuck. Because the common narrative, the one I absolutely tell myself when I'm the one quitting, is that I'm just lazy or I lack grit, right? I start thinking, well, clearly I just didn't want it enough.
And that, right there, is the most dangerous misconception we need to dismantle today. If 60% of people fail at the exact same time, in the exact same way, it is not a character flaw. It's not a moral failing. It is a biological checkpoint.
Wait, so you're saying this crash is essentially engineered into us?
It is a predictable biological and neurological event. The entire mission of this deep dive is to explain exactly why motivation inevitably crashes after the novelty wears off, because it always will, and then, more importantly, how to build a system that actually survives that crash. We need to stop relying on this outdated willpower model and switch to a system-based model.
I love that. So let's rewind back to the crime scene. The beginning, the fresh start. We are so obsessed with fresh starts, January 1st, birthdays, even Mondays. Why do these dates feel so magical to us?
It feels magical because of a concept called the fresh start effect. This has been extensively researched by Henshin Dai and her team at Wharton. They found that these dates act as temporal landmarks.
Temporal landmarks, at a mile marker on a highway.
Precisely like that. They create a distinct mental boundary in your timeline. It allows you to engage in a psychological trick called mental accounting. Your brain essentially files away all your past failures, your laziness, your bad habits, into a little folder labeled the old me.
Ah, yes. The old me. I know him very well. The old me ate pizza at midnight and skipped the gym for 3 years straight. But the new me, the one starting on Monday, he eats kale and runs at dawn.
Exactly. And the brain is actually very good at this compartmentalization. Because you have mentally separated yourself from those past failures, you feel a temporary surge of optimism. You literally feel immune to your past patterns. The new me is unblemished. It's a blank slate, and this creates a massive boost in motivation and an openness to change.
But it's a trick.
It is a complete deception. It relies on a window of neurochemical opportunity that closes very, very quickly. The data shows it usually slams shut right around mid-February, if not earlier.
Okay, so we're riding a high that isn't entirely real. Let's dig into the chemistry of that high. Because we always hear about dopamine, right? People say, I need a dopamine hit or I'm chasing dopamine. But in our research for this, it turns out most people, and I definitely include myself here, are using that word completely wrong.
They are. In popular culture, dopamine is almost always called the pleasure molecule. We think it's the reward we get when we eat the cookie or win the video game. But neurologically speaking, that is incorrect. Dopamine is not about pleasure. It is about anticipation. It is a prediction signal.
A prediction signal. Okay, you have to unpack that.
Yeah.
Because I definitely don't walk around doing math when I'm excited about eating a cookie.
No, you don't do the math consciously. But your midbrain is essentially acting as a constant betting machine. It is always placing bets on what is about to happen. In neuroscience, this is known as reward prediction error. And there's actually a formula for it. Delta equals R minus V.
Okay, no math anxiety here on the deep dive, but walk us through those variables.
It's very simple. Delta is the dopamine response, that's the prediction error. R is the actual reward you get, and V is the expected value, what you thought you were going to get.
Okay, got it. So dopamine equals reality minus expectations.
Perfect translation. Now, let's apply this directly to week 1. When you are planning your new life on New Year's Eve, you are visualizing the end result. You see yourself fit, wealthy, fluent in French, whatever it is. You aren't visualizing the sweat or the early mornings. You are just visualizing the outcome.
Right. I'm picturing the movie montage. I'm picturing myself looking great on the beach.
Right. And that simulation in your head triggers a massive release of dopamine. But here is the critical nuance that most people miss. You are getting a dopamine hit based on the expected value, or V in that equation. You haven't done a single push-up yet, but you feel amazing.
So I am literally high on the idea of the goal.
Precisely. You are front-loading the reward. Your brain says, wow, this outcome is going to be incredible. Here is some dopamine to get you there. That state is what we call high tonic dopamine.
Okay, so I'm flush with cash, chemically speaking.
But it's a loan. You just took out a massive neurochemical loan against your future effort. Now, let's fast forward to week 2. It's Tuesday morning. The alarm goes off. It is cold. Your legs are incredibly sore from the previous week. You drag yourself out of bed, look in the mirror, and you look exactly the same.
Zero change. The scale hasn't moved an inch.
So what is the actual reward, the R variable in that exact moment?
It's 0. Actually, I'd say it's negative. Because it hurts to walk and I'm exhausted.
Exactly. So let's run the brain's equation. Reward, which is 0, minus expectation, which was the huge beach body. You end up with a massive negative number. This is what neuroscientists call a negative prediction error.
And the brain doesn't just look at that and say, oh, well, keep going.
No. The brain panics. It interprets that negative number as a biological signal that the current behavior is non-viable. It cuts dopamine production not just back to your baseline, but significantly below baseline. You enter a dopamine deficit state.
Which feels like what? Exactly, to the person experiencing it.
It feels like profound apathy. It feels like a physical weight sitting on your chest. It is not just that you don't want to go to the gym, it's that your brain is actively withholding the very chemical fuel you need to initiate movement.
That explains so much. It explains why it feels physically painful to continue. It's not just me being lazy, it's my brain actually punishing me for making a bad bet.
Correct. And it gets worse. Because while your dopamine is crashing, another chemical is spiking. We have to talk about cortisol.
The stress hormone.
Yes. This is tied to a specific part of the brain called the anterior cingulate cortex, or ACC. The ACC functions like a disparity monitor. It constantly measures the gap between where you currently are and where you want to be.
And when you set a huge, life-changing New Year's resolution?
The gap is enormous. You are here, and the goal is a mile away. The ACC perceives this massive gap not as a fun challenge, but as a threat. It registers as a conflict. So to mobilize you, it triggers the release of cortisol. Data actually shows that goal-focused individuals, people who are obsessed with the big outcome, have 34% higher cortisol levels compared to system-focused individuals.
That is a significant jump. So ambitiously staring at a huge goal is literally stressing your body out on a chemical level.
It is. And this leads us to a fantastic concept coined by Dr. Andrew Huberman called limbic friction.
Limbic friction. I really love that term. It sounds like a sci-fi weapon, but it's actually happening right inside our heads.
It describes the mental strain required to overcome your autonomic nervous system. Generally speaking, you are fighting one of two states. Either you are too anxious and alert to focus, and that is the cortisol talking, or you are too tired and lazy to move, and that is the lack of dopamine.
And in week 2, you have both.
You have the perfect storm. You have low dopamine, so there is no drive, no anticipation of fun. And you have high cortisol, so you have high stress and high anxiety regarding that huge gap. This creates a state of maximum friction. This is exactly why 40% of people quit right here. They are trying to push a heavy boulder up a hill while their own biology is aggressively greasing the slope.
So we have the chemistry fighting us, but there's also a psychological trap we fall into, right? We touched on it briefly with the old me versus new me idea, but I want to go deeper into false hope syndrome.
This is a fascinating concept developed by psychologists Pallavi and Herman. False hope syndrome describes the cycle of having unrealistic expectations followed by inevitable disappointment. But the core error we make isn't just expecting to succeed, it's expecting the change to be easy and fast.
We want the montage sequence. We really just want to do 3 push-ups and then cut to us looking great on the beach.
Exactly. We suffer from inflated promises of change. We believe that fixing one single habit will magically fix our entire lives. We think, if I lose 10 pounds, I'll definitely get that promotion, my marriage will be perfect, and I'll be happy forever.
We load so much immense pressure onto that one fragile new habit. It's severe cognitive overload.
We really do. And we fall headfirst into the overconfidence trap. Olivia and Herman found something really interesting in their research. We are actually very good at accurately predicting how long a task will take for other people. But when we try to predict it for ourselves, we drastically underestimate the time and the effort required.
Oh, totally. It'll take Bob 3 months to get in shape, but I'm different. I'm built different.
Right, I'll knock it out in 3 weeks. And this sets us up perfectly for the reality collision. This collision usually happens right between day 10 and day 15.
Why that specific window, though? Why is day 12 so much worse than, say, day 4?
It comes down to context. Think about week 1 again. Often, it's the first week of January. You might still be on holiday break from work, your partner is supportive, the fridge is completely stocked with healthy food. You have essentially engineered a vacuum.
Right, it's an artificial environment. You are protected from the real world.
Completely protected. But in week 2, work starts back up in full force. The kids get sick, the boss is angry about a deadline, context returns, and the glaring problem is your new habit is context dependent. It relies heavily on that perfect week 1 vacuum. It simply hasn't developed the neural robustness to survive in a high-stress environment.
And sheer willpower isn't enough to save you when that happens.
Willpower is just a battery, and a surprisingly small one. Research suggests willpower significantly depletes after just 2 to 3 hours of intensive decision-making. So if you are relying on raw willpower to get you to the gym at 6 p.m. after a long, stressful day of work, the battery is already dead.
And that is exactly when the slip-up happens. Which leads us to my favorite, well, favorite is definitely the wrong word, my most relatable concept, the what the hell effect.
Oh, we have all been there. Technically, in the literature, it's called counter-regulatory behavior, but what the hell effect is so much more descriptive.
It's the classic cookie scenario. You eat one cookie, which absolutely wasn't on the diet plan, and instead of just saying, okay, that was one cookie, moving on, you say,
What the hell? I've already ruined the entire day. I might as well eat the whole box.
why do we do that? It seems so deeply illogical. It's like saying, I got a flat tire, so I might as well slash the other 3.
It is entirely illogical on the surface, but it is biologically driven. Here is the exact mechanism. First, you slip. You eat the cookie. Immediately, you feel a wave of guilt and shame.
The self-criticism kicks in hard.
Right. And that self-criticism activates the amygdala, which is the fear center of the brain, and the insula, which processes disgust. Your brain interprets this heavy guilt as a painful, highly stressful state. It essentially screams, I need relief from this. I need dopamine to soothe this terrible feeling.
And what is the fastest, most readily available source of dopamine?
The very thing you just did, the cookies. So you eat more cookies to soothe the intense shame of eating the first one. It's a vicious paradox.
The paradox is that we binge to feel better about the fact that we're binging.
Exactly. And the key insight here, and this is absolutely crucial for anyone listening, is that self-criticism actively fuels the what the hell effect. Research clearly shows that self-forgiveness actually turns off the pipeline of guilt.
Okay, I have to pause you right there, because that sounds, honestly, a little soft.
It sounds like woo-woo nonsense, right?
It really does. It sounds like letting myself off the hook. Oh, I ate the cookie. It's fine. I love myself. If I do that, one, I just immediately eat another cookie. Don't need that harsh guilt to keep myself in line.
You would think so. Our intuition tells us that punishment prevents bad behavior. But the neurology says something completely different. Guilt is a major stressor.
It certainly feels like stress when you're in it.
And when your brain is stressed, specifically in the amygdala, it desperately craves relief. It creates what psychologists call a negative affect state. So by relentlessly beating yourself up, you are actually increasing the neurochemical demand for the exact thing you are trying so hard to avoid.
That is just diabolical.
Huh.
So the guilt is actually a trigger for the binge.
It's the fuel for the fire. The study showed that participants who were explicitly instructed to forgive themselves for the first slip-up ended up eating significantly less candy subsequently than the ones who severely criticized themselves. You aren't letting yourself off the hook. You are deliberately de-escalating the stress response so your prefrontal cortex can finally come back online and say, okay, logically, put the box down.
That is a massive shift in perspective.
Mm.
Okay, so we have diagnosed the problem here. We are actively fighting dopamine crashes, cortisol spikes, and endless shame spirals. Now let's talk about timelines, because I think a lot of us quit in week 2 simply because we think we should be done by now. We have all heard the golden rule. It takes 21 days to form a habit.
The 21-day myth. This is one of the most pervasive zombies in the entire self-help literature. It just will not die.
Where did that even come from?
It comes from a plastic surgeon named Maxwell Maltz back in the 1960s. He observed that after a nose job or an amputation, it took his patients a minimum of 21 days to get used to seeing their new face or body in the mirror.
A minimum.
That's the key word, minimum. And he was talking about passively adjusting to a physical change, not actively building a complex new behavior like rigorous exercise or daily writing. But the great telephone game of pop psychology turned a minimum of 21 days for a nose job into it takes exactly 21 days to completely fix your life.
So what does the real hard data actually say?
The absolute gold standard study on this comes from Philippa Lally at University College London. She meticulously tracked people building real daily habits. The average time to automaticity, which is where you do the behavior without conscious thought, was 66 days.
66 days. That is more than 2 solid months.
And that is just the average. The range in her data was huge. It went from 18 days for very simple things like drinking a glass of water, all the way to 254 days for harder habits.
254 days. That is the vast majority of a year.
It really is. So if you are sitting in week 2, around day 14, and you honestly think you should be fixed by day 21, you are going to quit when it still feels incredibly hard. But if you know the real baseline timeline is 66 days, you realize, oh, I'm not broken. I'm just 20% of the way there.
It shifts the expectations completely. It actually prepares you for the middle problem.
The grind. Weeks 7 through 12. This is that long, quiet period where the initial excitement is completely gone, but the glorious finish line isn't even in sight yet. This is where unsexy consistency matters infinitely more than intensity.
Okay, so we know the realistic timeline now. Let's get into the practical solutions. How do we actually hack this? We need to build a resilient system. And you mentioned earlier that we need to stop fighting our biology and start aligning with it. This brings us back to Dr. Huberman and the phases of the day.
This is a total game changer for reducing that limbic friction we talked about. The core concept is called task bracketing. The idea is you shouldn't schedule your habits based on the clock, like saying, I'll do it at 6 p.m. You should schedule them based on your internal biological state.
Walk us through these specific phases.
Phase 1 is the first 0 to 8 hours after waking up. Biologically speaking, your body is naturally flooded with norepinephrine, epinephrine, and dopamine. Your cortisol is also naturally elevated, but in a good way, for daytime alertness.
So you are basically wired for action.
You are primed by your own chemistry to overcome resistance. So the actionable advice here is, do your hardest thing during this phase. This is the optimal time for high limbic friction habits. If you absolutely hate exercise, do it in phase 1. Your brain is chemically assisted to push through that heavy, I don't want to feeling.
Okay, I buy the chemistry entirely. My dopamine is crashed in week 2, my cortisol is high, but if I do it early, I have a natural biological tailwind. But I have to play devil's advocate here for a second. Phase 1 sounds great if you were a single biohacker living in a sleek, quiet apartment. But for people with little kids, or long commutes, or early hospital shifts, phase 1 is absolute chaos.
That is a very valid critique. It's the classic, must be nice to have a peaceful phase 1, right?
Right. My phase 1 is frantically making lunchboxes and trying to find lost shoes under the couch.
And that reality is very real, but the underlying biology remains true regardless of your daily schedule. Phase 1 is when you possess the go chemicals. If you try to do that high friction habit in phase 2, let's say 5:00 p.m., after a long day of work, you are essentially swimming upstream. In phase 2, which is roughly 9 to 15 hours after waking, your cortisol is naturally dropping. Your body is actively prepping for serotonin production. You are biologically designed to chill out and recover.
So when I say to myself, I'll go for that run after work, and then 5:000 p.m. rolls around and I feel like I'm wearing a lead vest, that's not me being lazy. That's me trying to aggressively override a natural serotonin wave.
You are fighting your own circadian rhythm. And in week 2, when you already have 0 dopamine left in the tank, you will lose that fight 9 times out of 10.
So if I have a completely chaotic morning and just can't work out then, what's the move? Do I just give up on the habit?
No, absolutely not. If you realistically cannot do the habit in phase 1, you have to use phase 1 to prep for phase 2. You treat your morning self like a dedicated pit crew for your evening self.
Explain how that works in practice.
You leverage implementation intentions to drastically reduce the friction later on. If you know you can't work out until 6:00 p.m., you have to prep everything during phase 1. You pack the gym bag, you put the car keys actually inside your running shoe, you set up the workout playlist, you make the hard decision while you still have those go chemicals active, so that when you finally get to the slow chemicals later, the decision is already fully made. You are automating your willpower.
That makes perfect sense. You are preloading the decision so you don't have to deliberate when you're exhausted.
Correct. And then phase 3, that's 16 to 24 hours, that is sleep. Deep sleep is when the neuroplasticity actually occurs. That's when the brain circuits actually wire together. If you aren't sleeping properly, you aren't building the habit. Period.
So scheduling isn't just about time management at all. It's entirely about energy management. It's state management.
Exactly. And within that structural framework, we need to talk about task bracketing via the basal ganglia.
The basal ganglia, that sounds like a supervillain's secret lair.
It's deep in the brain, yes. It heavily controls motor patterns and emotions. Specifically, we're looking at a region called the dorsolateral striatum. Research shows that when a habit is truly deeply formed, neural activity spikes sharply at the start of the action and at the end of the action, but it actually goes quiet during the action itself.
So it's like a set of bookends around the behavior.
Exactly. The brain says, start sequence, then you go on autopilot, and then end sequence. Our goal is to firmly build those neural brackets so the habit becomes completely context independent. You want to be able to brush your teeth whether you are in a weird hotel, at home, or out camping. You do it even if you're dead tired. That is what robust task bracketing looks like.
How do we actually build that kind of robustness, practically speaking?
We need to fundamentally shift how we talk to ourselves. We move from goal intentions to implementation intentions.
This is the if-then planning concept, right?
Yes. Most people rely on goal intentions. I want to work out more. That is just a wish. An implementation intention is highly specific. If it is Tuesday at 7 a.m., then I will run.
It sounds so incredibly simple. Does that minor linguistic shift actually matter in the real world?
It makes a huge difference. Studies consistently show that difficult goals are completed about 3 times more often when using this method. Why? Because it delegates the executive control to the environment. You aren't sitting there actively deciding to run, the clock is deciding for you. The if condition triggers the then action automatically. You completely remove the heavy decision-making process, which perfectly preserves that precious tiny willpower battery we talked about.
You are essentially turning yourself into a robot, in a good way.
In a very good way. And you can further support this automation with environmental design, otherwise known as choice architecture.
This is one of my absolute favorite topics, changing your physical space to passively change your behavior.
The golden rule here is, behavior is shaped by environment, not by intention. If you want to reliably change a behavior, you have to manipulate the friction in the environment.
Give us some concrete, everyday examples of friction manipulation.
Sure. If you want to stop a bad habit, you aggressively increase the friction. If you watch too much TV at night, don't just sit there and say, I will watch less TV. Unplug the TV from the wall. Take the batteries physically out of the remote. Put the remote in a drawer in a completely different room.
You make it extremely annoying to do the bad thing.
Exactly. You add just enough physical friction that the tired, lazy part of your brain looks at it and says, too much work, not worth it. Conversely, for good habits you want to build, you drastically decrease the friction. We call this the doorway drill.
The doorway drill, what's that?
If you want to run first thing in the morning, your shoes, socks, and running clothes should be laid out right in the doorway of your bedroom or directly next to the bed. You should practically trip over them when you wake up. You meticulously remove the friction of having to search for your socks in the dark.
You're greasing the slide for the good habits and throwing gravel on the slide for the bad ones.
And you can powerfully combine this with habit stacking. This is the practice of anchoring a brand new habit to an old, deeply established one.
Like brushing your teeth, as you mentioned before.
Right. You already brush your teeth every morning without fail. That specific neural pathway is already a superhighway in your brain. So you say, after I brush my teeth, I will meditate for exactly 60 seconds. You effectively hijack the existing momentum of the old habit to pull the new, fragile habit along with it.
I love that visual. Now, you just mentioned meditating for 60 seconds. That sounds remarkably short. Is that actually effective for real change?
It is highly effective because of the 2-minute rule. This concept comes from James Clear and other habit researchers. The core idea is that a new habit should initially take less than 2 minutes to do.
But logically, you can't get fit in 2 minutes a day.
That is not the point at all in the beginning. The goal is not the workout itself. The goal is mastering the art of showing up. If you commit to running a 5K every morning, that is deeply daunting to your brain. If you instead commit to just putting on my running shoes, that takes 30 seconds.
It acts as a gateway habit.
It effortlessly overcomes the inertia of rest. Once the shoes are securely on, you will probably end up running. But even if you don't run that day, you successfully reinforce the identity of someone who consistently puts on their shoes. And during week 2, when things are falling apart, maintaining that identity is vastly more important than the actual physical mileage.
That leads perfectly into our final section today, identity and the long game. We talked earlier about the old me versus the new me. How do we genuinely solidify that new me so it sticks?
We have to make a cognitive shift from outcome-based habits to identity-based habits.
What's the practical difference between those two?
An outcome is saying, I want to run a marathon. An identity is believing, I am a runner.
It's a subtle shift in phrasing, but it feels incredibly powerful.
It is profound. Every single time you do the habit, every single time you just put on those running shoes, you essentially cast a vote for that specific identity. In week 2, you aren't desperately trying to lose 20 pounds. You're simply casting daily votes to prove to yourself that you are a healthy person.
And once you truly believe the identity,
the behavior just becomes natural. That limbic override we discussed dramatically decreases. It eventually feels weirder not to do the habit. If you genuinely believe I'm a reader, then going to bed without reading feels deeply wrong. That is the moment you have won the game.
But we still have to survive the grind to get to that point, that long 90-day horizon. How do we keep our head in the game during weeks 7 to 12 when it's just boring?
We utilize feedback loops, and specifically a concept called the small area principle.
I haven't heard of this one. Tell me about it.
It's all about where you direct your focus.
Yeah.
Early on in the process, like right now in week 2, you should always look back at the small area of progress you've already made. You tell yourself, wow, I've actually done 10 days in a row. That generates motivation.
But later on in the timeline,
when you are halfway through the journey, looking back doesn't help nearly as much. You should flip it and look forward at the small area remaining. I'm almost there, only 2 weeks left.
So in the very beginning, you celebrate the streak, and at the end, you celebrate the proximity to the finish line.
Exactly. And keep your feedback loops very short. You want weekly reviews, not monthly ones. Week 2 moves way too fast for a monthly check-in. You need to actively catch the slip-up before it metastasizes into a massive what-the-hell moment.
This has been an absolutely incredible tour through the biology of why we quit. Let's try to distill and summarize this for the listener who is currently staring at their abandoned running shoes and feeling that heavy February guilt.
Here is the absolute core summary. You are failing because you are relying on the cheap dopamine of novelty, which is completely gone by week 2. You are actively fighting high cortisol and high limbic friction using a battery your willpower that is already dead.
So step 1, stop trying to feel motivated.
Stop waiting to feel like it. You never will. Start building proof instead. Pick just one habit. Make it embarrassingly small, strictly under 2 minutes. Schedule it in your phase 1 morning window or use phase 1 to rigidly prep for it. Use if-then planning to fully automate the decision. And when you inevitably slip, because you absolutely will forgive yourself immediately to short-circuit the shame spiral,
survive the week 2 reality collision, not by being mentally stronger, but by being systematically smarter.
Exactly. You design a resilient system that works even when you are exhausted, stressed, and completely unmotivated. That is precisely how you get to day 66.
I want to leave the listeners with a final provocative thought today. We have talked a lot about the distinct pain of week 2, that overwhelming feeling of, I really don't want to do this.
Consider this deeply. That feeling of heavy resistance, that I'd rather die than go to the gym feeling, that is not a signal that you are failing. It's not a signal that your plan is wrong or that you aren't cut out for this.
It's just neutral data.
It is simply a biological notification. It is a text message from your brain saying, the honeymoon phase is over. The real, difficult work of neurological rewiring has officially begun. If you can learn to treat that awful feeling as a neutral data point rather than a full-blown emotional crisis, if you can just look at it objectively and say, oh, hello, limbic friction, I was expecting you to show up, and then put on your shoes anyway, what else in your life could you endure long enough to truly master?
That is the ultimate question. Thank you for diving deep with us today. Go move those shoes to the doorway right now. We will see you next time.